So now we'd like to introduce our opening keynote speaker, and that is Hillary Hartley. She is the Chief Digital Officer and one of two deputy ministers in the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services in Ontario, and of course in charge of the whole Open Ontario mandate. So Hillary, without any further ado, we're so glad that you were able to jet down to Niagara today because we know that you are a much sought after speaker and on a very busy circuit. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mary. And just off the top, Minister Smith is still a minister and still very much going to be part of this ecosystem because he's now the Minister for Economic Development, Job Creation, and Trade. And so our ministry has been working very closely together since the beginning of the new mandate on all things digital, data, open for business, etc. Minister Smith's a great guy. We're going to miss him, but very excited to get to work with Minister Bill Walker. First and foremost, thank you all for having me here today. I'm excited to help kick off today. And I know my team is excited to be here, so I do hope, as Minister Smith said, that you'll stop by the booth, chat with folks from the Open Government team. If you're in the room, give a little wave real quick. There they are. Excellent. So thanks, team, for showing up and for being here this week. And thanks again to all of you. I'm thrilled. I was appointed the Deputy Minister of Consumer Services in June after coming to the Ontario government in April of 2017 as the Deputy Minister responsible for digital government. And in that role, I got to start the Ontario Digital Service and build a small team kind of at the center of government to be the center of gravity around digital expertise, support, etc. And in June, got my mandate expanded a little bit, so now I get to work with Consumer Protection Ontario, Service Ontario. The Open Government team is joined at the hip with the Ontario Digital team now, and I couldn't be more proud to be leading each of those efforts. This is a great quote by a very smart lady named Janet Hughes over in the UK. One of my favorite blog posts last year was by Janet Hughes, talking about digital organizations and the nature of digital organizations and really truly what does it mean to be digital. And she starts the whole thing off with this quote. There's a bit of a misconception that if you don't develop applications, if you're not working on code, if you're not working with technology, that your team, your organization, you're not digital. And I couldn't tell you that's further from the truth, in my opinion. For us, digital is it's very all-encompassing in a way when we're talking about the era that we're in, because it really is about applying the culture, the practices, the processes, the technologies of this internet era and using them to respond to people's raised expectations. At the end of the day, you all, whether you've kind of thought about it recently or not, your expectations of how you get information and how you get services are higher than they've ever been before. And government is not immune from that, immune to that. And we have to be kind of right up in the mix, considering and thinking about what it means to be digital. I believe that it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of approaching problems, of solving human problems, really to produce better outcomes. In a world where the internet, where computers are helping us do so many of the things that we do every day. And we are expecting that speed, that instant gratification of sorts, convenience and simplicity. Really becoming digital, in my view, is cultural. It's operational. It's that shift that, that those pieces are as important, if not more important, than technology, because it really is, at the end of the day, it's about your values, it's about your approach to problem solving, the way you work, and what drives your decision making, both as a leader, as a team, as an organization. A digital product team, a digital organization, is focused on results, on outcomes, on continuous improvement. And the key there for me is that we are constantly putting people at the center of our work to ensure that, above all, we're meeting their needs. Excuse me. So for me, digital government is just good government. Digital government is focused on you, on our users. It's not about technology as much as it's about empathy. I've joked many times that instead of my title being CDO, thank you so much, Mary, Chief Digital Officer, I should change my title to Chief Empathy Officer. Because really, that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help teach my peers, my teams, the teams across the OPS about how to have empathy and bring that into the work that we do so that we're building the right things in the right way for the right reasons. And this is our mission statement. And I see it now cropping up all over, not just my ministry, but across government, because it's what we're here to do. We're here to figure out how to make government specifically simpler, faster, and better. And we get there by focusing on people. We get there by focusing on our users. We get there by focusing on accessibility and on inclusion, by building platforms, services with a common core, and by empowering and enabling our teams to just get things done. And lastly, but not least, of course, with this audience, is by being open in our work and helping the rest of government be more open. I firmly believe that government can be simple, beautiful, and easy to use. And the Ontario Digital Service is helping teams all across the province explore new ways of delivering that are people-centered, digital-first, and really focused on openness. We want people to experience government changing on the outside the same way I truly do feel it changing on the inside. It's going to be slow, it's going to take a long time, but we are marching forward always. And to do this, we are trying to bring about transformation inside our own organization. I sort of hate the word transformation and digital transformation. I was trying to debunk digital a little bit there at the beginning, and transformation is something that gets thrown around a lot, but I'm personally stuck with it. And so I use it to really try to talk about, how transformation is often used when we're talking about big stuff. It's the whole enchilada, it's the home run. But that big transformation, which absolutely is the goal, happens a little at a time. It happens when one person steps up and says, I think we should do this differently. I think we can do this differently, which prompts someone else to stand up next to them, and someone else, and then another person, and another person. And that's when you start to see practices and behavior change, when you're giving people a new way to see their problems, a new method of investigating. Then that's when you start to see expectations change. You ask questions. You start changing some of those entrenched and probably outdated practices. You start asking why. Why are we doing it this way? Why have we always done it this way? That's when you start to get at the heart of this stuff. And we're doing this, I'm doing this, anybody on my team, I believe, would give you the same answer, is that we're doing it because at the end of the day, all of that adds up, especially in a government context, to people's lives being better. And wanting their interactions, wanting all of your interactions with government to be easier. And we have to relentlessly focus on people to keep moving in that direction. The Open Government Partnership says that an open government is one where people understand and can participate in what their government is doing. So in Ontario, we are creating a more open and transparent government through sharing data and information and by engaging with the people of Ontario. We take small actions every day to lead by example, to build that culture where we are working out loud and in the open. Because I fundamentally believe that working openly, even just across our team, is core to the change that we're trying to make. It's core to that cultural transformation that's at the heart of what I truly believe is quote-unquote digital transformation. And when we work in the open, when we document decisions that we've made, when we blog about things that we're working on and that we're struggling with, we show to ourselves, along with other areas of our organization and the whole government and the public, how we think and how we work. A big part of that is trust. A government that is efficient, accountable, and trusted. Trust is a key theme, not just for our teams, but certainly in the open government and open data world. And just like working in the open builds trust, opening government data builds trust as well. We're essentially putting our cards on the table. We also have to protect that trust by keeping data safe and by protecting the privacy of the data that has been entrusted to us, entrusted to the government. In Ontario, the Open Data Directive embraces the motto, open by default. We really are striving to make all government data public on ontario.ca, except when we're protecting privacy or one of the other exemptions. But currently, over 700 data sets have been made available on Ontario's data catalog, which you've probably been hearing about and hopefully will hear more about, and you can go talk to the team about. And when our data isn't open, we are taking that extra step to explain why it's not. When I joined the Ontario Public Service 18, 19 months ago, I was asked a couple of really fundamental questions about the digital mandate. And the first was, why are you so focused on public service, public services? We need help too, which is absolutely true. And it's one reason I'm really proud to be joined at the hip now with Service Ontario, because, and in the same ministry as a lot of our internal services. We are helping work on some of those. But definitely the second most common question was something along the lines of, what about open government? And what is that split between digital and open? And I firmly believe, and I stole this quote from a very smart person, but I firmly believe that open government without digital doesn't scale. And digital government without open government simply doesn't last. So I'm thrilled to be the deputy for both digital and open, that they're now in the same organization, embracing two approaches that certainly complement and reinforce each other. It's a virtuous cycle. Opening government information and data and engaging with the people of Ontario means that government can draw on the wisdom and expertise of the conversations all of you are having at events like this and events across the world. At the same time, digital services focused on the user mean we're making the right information available in an understandable way, and digital systems mean that more and more government data is able to be shared as open data. The OECD, which probably some of you or most of you have seen, but it just released a pretty big report looking at open government across the world. There's a quote in there that touches upon this notion, which I think is fundamental, and it's the idea that digital government and open data policies are cross-cutting by nature, which connects them to other policy areas also relevant for good governance. So I'll say it again. Digital government and open government are really just good government. Going back to trust, open data is about data governance. We all expect that our government data will be well governed. Open where it can be, certainly, securely stored, and protecting privacy or other considerations when required. And the conversation certainly is growing. Open data is no longer a nice to have. It's a need to have. People expect our data to be available. People are using open data to build businesses, to hold government to account. to access services and understand what's happening in the world today. Open data is educating our students. I was at an event just a couple of weeks ago where a brother and a sister got on stage with an Arduino device that they'd made to essentially map the safest route for them to get to school. And how did they do that? Open Ontario government data. Ontario's data is being used in classrooms to allow students to build skills to operate in a digital, data-driven world. And to allow them to address, real problems, not unlike, the safest route to school, but problems that they're facing in their schoolwork. It's weaving itself into their lives in many different ways. The International Open Data Charter, which is a great set of principles that we have adopted in Ontario, talks about empowering a future generation of data innovators inside and outside government. And this is certainly one way we know we're empowering today's students. And now that open data is expected, the conversations are really moving from why to what's next. And just as importantly, to who has a voice. Excuse me. One thing that I've been hearing in these conversations is the phrase, publish with purpose. The Open Data Charter is exploring this idea as they consult and refresh the charter. And they continue thinking about how open by default can be supplemented by focused efforts to target that high-value data that's needed by open data users. At the end of March, the Ontario Digital Service launched our Digital Action Plan. It's really our North Star, our roadmap to digital transformation inside government and inside the public service. And our plan focuses on these 5 pillars of action. So first and foremost, again, focusing on people, the concept of people-centered design and people-centered delivery. Fostering a digital economy, inclusion, equity, and access. This is everything from accessibility to inclusive design to how we can get more and more access, whether that's broadband or 5G or hotspots in libraries. How can we expand that footprint of who has access to our services? The concept of government as a platform. Again, how do we build services with a common core so that things are easy to spin up quickly? The public service of the future. And a through line through all of these is certainly that open is key. People are at the heart of our vision. When we obsess about user needs and not government needs, I'll say that again, we have to obsess about user needs, not government needs. We have to ask questions like, what do people need to know? What are they trying to accomplish? When we do that, the better our services become. And we all know what great experiences, what great services feel like. This little thing kind of changed a lot of things 10 years ago in terms of, again, the raising expectations, the ability to get things done easily, the simple touches that designers and developers are weaving into these the applications, the devices, the experiences that we have. We all know when we've had a good experience. A good service is simple. You don't need training to use it. You can figure it out. And people generally adopt them organically because they're just better. They're simpler. So we're trying to make sure that in everything we do, for every decision that we make, we are keeping our end users in mind, the people who are actually going to be using those products or services for those reasons, because we all know what good feels like. We have to constantly be continuously improving and working to get better and better, because the only way to do that, again, talking about being people-centered is easy, but the only way to do that is to talk to people, to ask them, to get them involved early and often, whether that's through user research, usability testing, co-design activities, really collaborating with the folks that are going to use our services. And it's not a one-time activity. It's not enough just to do it at the beginning. To say, I did some user research, I understand where we're going, and just keep going. It's a cyclical activity. Ideally, we're building in user research, usability testing, some form of feedback into each sprint, into each piece of our product building lifecycle. And getting open data right is a huge piece of that. It can't be done in isolation. Data is generated by people. It's maintained by people, and it's used by people. So we're trying to apply this same people-centered approach in our consultations with Ontarians, in our approach to open data, following the Open Data Directive. Last year, we regularly met with some of Ontario's open data community to ensure we were on track as we implemented the International Open Data Charter. And as a result of their feedback, our data catalog now has a Tell Us How We're Doing button. It's available on every open data set, and we're inviting people to give feedback, to continuously help us improve, not just how they're getting access to the data, but to improve the data itself. In our evolving digital world, new opportunities for fostering the digital economy are constantly emerging. When we foster a digital economy, tomorrow looks like a place that mobilizes and supports innovation, not just in certain sectors, but really across, and especially in government. Ontario's open data is, as I mentioned already, being used by businesses, schools, people across Ontario. Some are using it behind the scenes as part of their work. Others are putting it front and center, using it to power new apps, websites, services, etc. As the conversation expands to include new things like AI or blockchain, which will have a real effect on making something in your life easier, an interaction with the government easier. We're looking for opportunities to get beyond the hype of those buzzwords and understand true use cases, really understand how we can apply some of that emerging technology to products and services being built. Our goal as a delivery organization is to ensure that government remains relentlessly focused on user needs, ensures that online services are inclusive, accessible, and usable for anyone who needs them. Making accessibility a priority is very hard work. It's hard to do no matter when you do it, but it's especially hard if you don't do it from the beginning, if you don't start with that at the heart of your approach. It requires you to think of ways to deliver a product differently so that people with many different abilities can find it easy to use. You have to bake it in from the start. Accessibility is also not just about the data, the code, the design, the look and feel, the words that you're choosing, but it's all of those things. And it's got to be part of how you're thinking about that service, the delivery of that service, from the beginning through to the very last copy edit that you make. In open data, this means using open formats from day one. It means standardized data, and it means building capacity to use and understand it. Government teams shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel each time they build a service. Sharing common tools and components across services can create the behavior change needed for greater digital uptake and trust and adoption. For many Ontarians, they're interacting with the provincial government in two important ways, usually through a service counter at Service Ontario or online via ontario.ca, which is the government's web platform. So, we're taking steps to make both of those service offerings kind of feel like a continuous experience, a similar experience. We've tried to make sure that ontario.ca has easy to understand, clear language, a clean, simple design layout. We are relentlessly focused on accessibility and inclusive design practices so that we're thinking about how do we design for the edges, How do we design for that 10 to 15% of folks that probably will have a hard time interacting with your service? And how do we design for them? Because then you're going to catch everyone else. And ensuring that we are optimized for mobile. Imagine a future where all online service interactions with government are clear, consistent, beautiful, simple to use. I laugh because it does sometimes feel like a pipe dream, but that's the goal. And the goal is to provide the same experience, regardless of the program or the service being accessed to anyone who needs it. Another great example that I had the privilege of working on was from the U.S., where the digital service teams at the federal government in the U.S., a team called 18F, the U.S. Digital Service, and the digital team at the Department of Education, they all worked together to deliver something that was called a college scorecard. The background there is that the president essentially, the scorecards that kind of come out ranking colleges and universities every year. And he said, we've got all the data. Why don't we put one of those out? And the team did a bunch of user research and took prototypes to the Capitol Mall in D.C. and got students and parents that were coming out of the Science Museum or the American History Museum, and they kind of stop them and say, hey, can you take a look at this? What do you think? Got a ton of feedback just about a couple of different approaches. So we were able to say to the president, Mr. President, your idea of a list is great, but actually what people want, what they need, is the ability to choose for themselves, to say, this is important to me, this feature is important to me, this is what I want out of my college experience, and to then use the data to give them their own ranking. Not a government top 10 ranking, but give me my personal top 10 ranking. Again, lots and lots of data was available, and the Department of Education was actually releasing a bunch of new fields for the first time. So we worked together with the Department of Education and actually with about a dozen different service providers that had built tools using the original set of open data. And it launched at edu.gov, and because we were kind of working in the open, and I say kind of because the product wasn't in the open, but we were doing the API in the open. And so we were able to actually get folks using the data and using that API before we were live, and as the project was in the works, so that we could see how we could how we needed to make it better, what data wasn't up to snuff by the time that we were ready to go live. So we were all working together, and the tools were getting used. They were serving communities and constituents that government wouldn't necessarily reach. So we all worked together to launch on the same day, and ask them to deliver to their constituents on our API along with us. So we released the official government scorecard the same day that those stakeholders were able to reach their audiences. And it was a really eye-opening moment for so many of our stakeholders that we were working in the open, that we were working with people outside of government to help not only our API get better, but to help our data get better. And they could see that our product was very successful, but we weren't able to reach all of those other audiences that the other folks were able to reach through the same data. And it was a fantastic experience, not only for my team, as I said, but also for our stakeholders to experience for the first time. The last pillar of the action plan focuses on the public service and the changes that I believe we need to make within the public service to get ourselves to work and feel like a digital organization. Thank you, Bianca. It takes hard work for all of this, but it takes hard work to create the conditions for innovation. I started off the top by sort of talking about how digital to me isn't necessarily the fact that something works on a device like this, but it is about that hard work to change your culture, to change the culture of service delivery. But teams that are multidisciplinary, open, collaborative, they're going to thrive in that experimental culture. And it requires leaders to step out of our comfort zones, to drive decision-making to the edges of our organization. Because we have to trust that the teams that we put in place to do the work that we're asking them to do, that empowered teams will deliver better value and better outcomes. I was at an event and got to hear the CEO of Netflix talk. And he was joking that he hadn't made a decision in a quarter. Now, think about that. The CEO of the company bragging about the fact that he hadn't made a decision in a quarter. But what that, he was involved in the big ones, mergers and things like that. But what that meant was he was driving every day very important decisions out to the people that should be making them. The right people at the right level of the organization with the right understanding of the problem, making important decisions. And as we move towards a more innovative, efficient public service, our digital team and our open government team has been working tirelessly to develop new tools and services. And the Open Government's launch of their new portal to help us share data and information across ministries was a very exciting moment. And it was exciting not just for our team, but they held an event and like 200 people showed up on a random, Tuesday or something. It was fantastic because people are craving this. They're craving access. They're craving access to data. They want tools like that to be the forcing function that they can then take to their teams and their leaders to say, hey, it's easy. We've been told to do it. Let's get more data out there. So the launch of Collab On, AKA Colby, is helping us become accountable and transparent. It's helping us become more open, really by helping all of us in the public service find and share the data that we need to deliver services, policy advice, and make decisions quickly and efficiently. The line-by-line review that Ernst & Young did of the public service and of the Ontario government recently, it absolutely emphasized the need for a centralized government database, a centralized structure to allow for the comparative analysis of data. And that's really what Colby aims to deliver, a centralized, uniform way of finding and accessing data throughout government. Ultimately, Colby is absolutely going to help us break down not just data silos, but organizational silos between ministries. And that is hugely important to this culture change that we're trying to bring. It's going to encourage cooperation on interministerial projects. And the data-powered tools and collaboration that Colby will spur are right in front of us, and I'm so proud of the team and so excited to see what comes next. Because all of that work that's happening in ministries and across teams is what is fostering an environment of continuous improvement, and that is critical to creating the public service of the future. With this summit bringing together Canada's open data community, I know there are going to be some great discussions. I'm hoping to be here for the rest of the morning. I do have to get back because, as I mentioned, we have a new minister. He just started this week, so we're kind of starting from the beginning with some of our briefings, but I do have to get back this afternoon. But I'm excited to hear some of the conversation and some of the discussion happening today. There's an active public conversation taking place across Canada now about data, about the importance of data. And I hope we can all push that discussion forward here in Niagara Falls at this summit. Some of the things that I and my team have been hearing in open data discussions, internationally, the discussion is moving beyond open by default to publish with purpose. Again, that phrase and that idea of purpose being incredibly central to how we move forward. There are big questions about openness in artificial intelligence and very big opportunities as well. For instance, if you applied AI to our lab results, you could start to understand and predict patterns that could help patients. I'm wearing an Apple Watch, which some folks probably think is tracking me, and I know it is. You know, it's been called the #1 watch and the #1 health monitor. You know, Apple's really starting to change from it, you know, just kind of talking about a watch to being the thing that's, you know, that can help you maintain good health. Watch your heart. I'm excited to get my mother-in-law one, quite frankly, because it has the fall monitor thing now, you know, and it'll ping me or my wife if she falls. She does have heart issues. It goes out of rhythm, and we could get a text when that happens and not have to just rely on her. So we are in a world where, you know, by wearing this watch, I can be instantly notified of certain health conditions, you know, just by standing here. And I think we're starting to think about big data like that and the potential that it has for governments. It's all very interesting. It's a little scary, be frank, but super interesting with a ton of potential. I mentioned our digital action plan and the title of that plan, which is available online at ontario.ca/digital plan, I think. But if you go to ontario.ca/digital, you can find a whole bunch of information. But we named our plan Start with Users and Deliver Together because, again, first and foremost, this is about people and delivering for the people of Ontario. And digital transformation, a transformation around openness and transparency requires just that. Keeping people at the center, working together side by side to spread the practices, the processes, the knowledge needed to become a digital organization, which at the end of the day, you know, brings us all back to outcomes. Outcomes and the values that we hold to drive toward those outcomes are what matters most. As I've said a couple times, digital government and open government really, for me, are just good government. I hope digital government goes away. I hope we just start talking about government and that it's expected, that it's digital, that it's open. Because it is about just being good government, better service delivery, better program delivery. It's about being there all hours of the day when people need us. So we have to start with users. We have to deliver together. And I'm excited to hear more about your thoughts on that the rest of the day. Thank you very much for having me.